Now, I spoke to Olympic legend Ian Thorpe earlier here in Canberra. I asked him what his fundamental concern is with this religious freedom bill.
Yeah, so the religious discrimination bill that we're seeing, this is the third time that we've seen it, and there's been concerns. So there's been enough consultation that there could be amendments that could have been made to this bill already. The concerns that we have, it's not just for people within the LGBTIQ community. There's people with a disability. It also could affect pregnant women. So it goes much broader. And when we look at these institutions that may be faith-based, where we look at aged care, when we look at hospitals, and the other services that may be provided outside of what we traditionally think of what a faith-based organisation or what a church does or a temple or whatever that religion might be, it also gives the opportunity to discriminate. And the worst part of it is that you can discriminate against children. And school should be a safe place for every child, no matter what their background is and no matter what their gender identity, it doesn't matter. It should just be a safe place, and the government should support that. If they do not support that and they actually allow this to happen, it really does amount to state-sanctioned discrimination.
The government is moving to ensure that children cannot be discriminated against based on their sexual orientation at school. Does that not go far enough in terms of protections against that discrimination?
It doesn't, and the reason being is that the government has had 3.5 years to do this. Since the Wentworth by-election that happened, that's the time that they've had to make that amendment when the Prime Minister had promised that these things would be put in place. They haven't been. They're saying it will be 6 to 12 months where we don't know whether or not that will happen in the appropriate amount of time. We're hoping that the opposition will actually insist on these measures being put in place in this bill. It also doesn't protect teachers and teachers that may, happen to be gay, that work at a religious school. Your sexuality does not have an impact on your ability to do a job. It may affect someone with a disability as well, that they're told that, they're a heathen because of that disability or it's a punishment from God. So there's a lot more that needs to happen with this bill. This bill has not had many friends in Canberra, if any, and it would be better to be scrapped rather than go through this entire process.
The government says that in relation to transgender children, that those added protections will be looked at after the election as opposed to before it. But in terms of sexual orientation, they will move as part of the drafting process within the next fortnight. Does that, in your mind, have two separate standards for different kids?
No, it is. You're making, it's the same assumption of choosing to be gay. You don't make that choice. That is how you're biologically made up, and the same for a trans person. And we also know that the ACL has actually looked, and it's on record, that they saw a weak spot against, the LGBTIQ community, against Equality Australia, that was actually around trans issues. And what it is, you saw a brilliant person this morning, Olivia, who is a great trans representative that actually speaks to politicians about what it's like. It's the misunderstanding and the fact that most people have not had the opportunity to meet someone that's trans, or if they did, they probably didn't know about it.
And finally, Ian, do you have a view in terms of the need to protect those of religious faith?
Yes.
What's your thinking on that as it relates to the rights of others? Because, of course, in this debate, it's almost like there are competing rights at play.
Well, you never gain any freedom from restricting the freedom of someone else. And I grew up in a Christian family. My parents continue to go to church every week. So does my grandmother. That right in itself, in secular Australia, I want to be protected. And not just for people of a Christian faith, for people of any faith. And I would be here actually arguing the same thing if those rights were being removed, because it is fundamental to Australia's openness and our identity. But what needs to be considered is the impact that will have in other groups and what potentially could happen to people that are even in faith-based organisations that may be in a minority. And you have to remember, it isn't an us against them. There is just as many faith-based communities that are on board with what we're trying to do, what we're trying to say to Parliament and to get this through in an appropriate way.